This segment of Delmarva Life is brought to you by Tunnel and Reysor.
Well, this time of year, it seems like we can't go a few days without hearing of a pedestrian struck at the beach or a bicyclist hit while riding along Route 1.
And maybe you're the one behind the wheel. How many times have you had to slam on the brakes or swerve to avoid hitting somebody in the street?
When someone is hit, there are not only physical injuries that those involved may end up with for quite a while, but there are also legal issues. And joining us today to help us better understand is Attorney Kelly Geloff, Managing Partner at Tunnel and Reysor in Sussex County. Thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
So Kelly, we're going to start with pedestrians. Listen to some of the statistics coming from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. In 2010, more than 4,200 pedestrians were killed in traffic crashes in the United States. 70,000 pedestrians were injured. This averages to one crash-related pedestrian death every 2 hours and a pedestrian injury every 8 minutes. Wow. Kelly, those numbers are pretty scary, and you have these problems happening all over Delmarva. What do you say to people who maybe this happened to?
Yeah, well, the biggest thing for pedestrians, especially living in the beach areas where we have so many of them down here in Delmarva, is the pedestrians still need to abide by their own rules, which is using a crosswalk. Mm-hmm. But the drivers also have to pay attention, even if those pedestrians are not using their crosswalk. It doesn't give them the ability to just run them over because they're not in a crosswalk. So you do have to be careful, and both pedestrians and drivers have to be defensive when out there. They need to pay attention, especially this time of year.
Okay, so let's say I'm a pedestrian, I'm crossing the road, I'm not in a crosswalk, and I get hit by a car. What should I do?
Well, especially if you're injured, you should still call the police to the scene. Depending on who's at fault, you just don't know what would end up happening, but no matter who's at fault, there's a chance that the person who was the pedestrian, if they don't have health insurance and they need some medical attention, it's worth calling the police, because there's a chance that the vehicle that hit you, their insurance would cover your medical bills. It's called PIP, so sometimes it does extend to the pedestrian, which is important for people to know.
Yeah.
Now, what about a driver who hits a pedestrian who's not in a crosswalk?
Well, even if you're not charged criminally or some kind of a traffic violation, you still have to be concerned, because you have to be looking out for pedestrians. Now, if there was no crosswalk even available for that pedestrian, as you can see down Route 1, there's long stretches where there aren't crosswalks. Well, if it was very reasonable for that pedestrian to have been crossing at that time, and perhaps you, the driver, was speeding, then it still can be your fault. So you just have to be careful.
Talking about bicyclists now, with plenty of them on the roads this time of year, also it's another issue that can really be dangerous. The CDC is reporting that each year more than 700 people in the U.S. die as a result of bicycle-related injuries. More than 500,000 people, that's 500,000 people, are injured. In 2001, the CDC reported children 15 years and younger accounted for 59% of all bicycle-related injuries. Again, some very scary numbers. So what should we keep in mind?
Well, both bicyclists and drivers have to keep some things in mind, as well as pedestrians. But bicyclists, they are having to abide by the same rules of the road as a vehicle. So they need to be going according to along with traffic. They're allowed to be on any roads unless specifically excluded. At night, they really need to have their safety equipment working so that they can be seen. But also, again, with the drivers of vehicles, they have to pay attention that bicyclists are allowed to be on those roads. So if they get into an accident with them, the driver potentially could be responsible, because it's not okay just to not have seen them. Especially right now, you have to pay attention that bicyclists are out there. They're allowed to be out there too.
And certain bicyclists have to wear a helmet. I know in Delaware, if under 18, you must wear a helmet. And you can actually, if you can't afford one, you can get a free one through schools. Here's a number to call, 302-670-BIKE. In Maryland, it's under 16. You must wear a helmet. So basically, children must wear a bicycle helmet. Of course, we have all that information on our website.
Now, legally, when a bicyclist gets hit by a car, what happens legally for both of them, on both ends of the situation?
Well, again, it depends on who is at fault, and each state is different as far as whether the person, oftentimes the bicyclist is the one that's getting hit by a vehicle and becomes more significantly injured, which seems like common sense because they don't have as much protecting them. In Delaware, if it was partially the responsibility of the bicyclist to have caused the accident, because maybe it was more the vehicle, but the bicyclist could have done a little something different.
Right.
Well, in Delaware, they can apportion responsibility, and if the bicyclist was injured, they actually would end up potentially getting compensation. It just would be reduced by that percentage of liability, that whether an insurance company determines it or if you end up going to a jury trial, a jury can actually reduce that in Delaware. Now, Maryland is a little bit different.
What happens in Maryland?
In Maryland, if you are found slightly at fault, 1% at fault, that person who's slightly at fault gets zero compensation.
That's
All
it.
right. Now we're moving on to motor scooters. We're seeing a lot more of these days because they're inexpensive, but there are plenty of rules that need to be followed if you're riding a motor scooter. In Maryland, motor scooters and mopeds must be insured and have a title with the state, just like cars. Operators and passengers must also wear a helmet and have some type of protection. And motor scooter and moped operators must have a valid driver's license or a moped operator's permit in Maryland. So those are the Maryland rules. What about Delaware? What are the rules for them?
Well, Delaware has rules for scooters and for mopeds. Now, the scooters are treated very similarly as a motorcycle is. So you still need to have it taken a look at. You need to have it. You need to have a valid motorcycle license, like an endorsement on your license, in order to actually have a scooter in Delaware. Now, mopeds are a little bit different.
All right,
So-
and you have to have some of these this equipment, right?
Got to have all of this? Brakes, headlights, taillights, stoplights, turn signals, all of this stuff that you would have to have on a motorcycle.
Correct.
Mirror, muffler, speedometer.
Yeah.
And that's specifically in Delaware.
A lot of rules.
Yes.
A lot to know.
Important stuff to know, whether you're the driver or you're the bicyclist or you're the pedestrian. Kelly Geloff, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
joining us this afternoon.
Thank
Always
you.
informative.
Really
And
good
if you'd
stuff.
like to read more about Tunnel and Reysor, or if you missed any of the information we just discussed, including contact information to get a helmet, go to delmarvalife.com and click on the show tab.
So still ahead on Delmarva Life, in theory, dieting is simple. Low fat, low calories, lose weight. However, some diet foods may be fooling you. We're going to find out what foods some nutritionists say you should never eat if you want to slim down.
And we're trying to figure out where Brian is on Delmarva. Brian, we're ready for our first clue.
Well, Jimmy and Lisa, here is your first clue. First of two clues, so pay close attention. Clue number one. Legend says it all started in 1869. One more clue to go. Stay with us. You're watching Delmarva Life. We will be right back.